Derek Vaughan, a celebrated chef known for his culinary genius, shocked the nation, not for his famous dishes, but for the gruesome way he silenced his wife after she uncovered his horrifying secret. What happens when ambition turns monstrous, and love blinds us to the truth? This is the chilling story of betrayal, obsession, and murder. Before we delve into this gripping tale, subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more stories that explore the darkest corners of human behavior. Derek Vaughan was a man whose name echoed through the culinary world. At 38 years old, he had built an empire of successful restaurants celebrated for their innovation and a signature promise: dishes crafted from unique, sustainable ingredients. His charm was magnetic, his artistry unparalleled, and his methods cloaked in an air of mystery that only seemed to add to his allure. Derek lived for his craft, often disappearing into late-night kitchen sessions or accepting strange, unmarked deliveries with the precision of a man safeguarding a secret. By his side was Regina Vaughan, 34, a dedicated police officer whose world was rooted in justice and order. Regina had always admired Derek's passion and the precision he brought to everything he touched, including their marriage of 8 years. Their relationship was a dynamic balance, her grounded nature complementing his relentless creativity. They had met when Derek catered a department gala where Regina, then a young officer, found herself captivated by his charisma and the undeniable energy of his presence. Their love story blossomed over shared meals, late-night talks, and Derek's whispered promises of a future filled with success and adventure. For years, Regina stood proudly by her husband's side as his restaurants soared in acclaim. She was his rock, defending his eccentricities to those who questioned his secrecy. When Derek would lock himself in the basement for hours, claiming to be testing recipes, Regina brushed off concerns. "That's just Derek," she would say, her voice tinged with affection. "He's a genius. Geniuses are quirky." But as Derek's fame grew, so did his peculiarities. He started receiving mysterious deliveries late at night, crates that were quickly ushered into his basement workspace. Regina, used to Derek's private nature, never pried. She trusted him completely. Besides, she had her own demanding career to focus on, a job that often meant long shifts and an ever-present tension in their Cleveland neighborhood. Their lives intertwined in subtle ways. Regina's precinct occasionally dined at Derek's flagship restaurant, tasting the artistry her husband had become famous for. Derek, in turn, would often credit Regina's support in interviews, painting a picture of an ideal partnership. On their rare nights off together, Derek would surprise her with decadent meals, the ingredients so exquisite that Regina would jokingly ask, "Where do you even find this stuff?" Derek would always respond with a coy smile and a nonchalant, "A chef never reveals his secrets." But behind the facade of their perfect life, an unsettling undercurrent loomed. Derek's insistence on secrecy began to feel less like an artistic quirk and more like something Regina couldn't name. The locked basement, the peculiar smells that sometimes wafted up, the way Derek's demeanor would shift when she asked innocent questions, all of it stirred a faint unease. Regina, ever the pragmatist, ignored the niggling doubt. Derek was a good man, a devoted husband. He couldn't possibly have anything to hide. Yet, the Vaughan's perfect image was built on cracks, and those cracks were beginning to widen. The world admired Derek's brilliance, his wife adored him, and his restaurants flourished. But behind it all was a darkness Regina was not prepared to confront, a darkness that would soon engulf them both. The missing persons case landed on Regina Vaughan's desk like any other, a routine investigation into the disappearance of a local delivery driver, Marcus Ellis, whose last known stop was recorded at Derek's restaurant. It wasn't unusual for Regina to encounter such cases in her line of work. Still, this one felt different. Marcus was well-liked in the community, dependable, and known for his punctuality. His sudden disappearance raised more questions than answers. As Regina delved into Marcus's background, she uncovered an unsettling pattern. Over the past 3 years, there had been a series of disappearances in the same neighborhood. All unrelated at first glance, but when Regina cross-referenced their last known locations, a peculiar connection emerged. Derek's restaurant sat at the center of the overlapping radius. Her mind reeled at the coincidence, but love and trust in her husband kept her from letting the idea take root. It wasn't until Derek casually mentioned Marcus that Regina's unease deepened. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner after a long day, Derek brought up a meeting with Marcus. He stopped by the restaurant last week. We had a good talk about sourcing some rare ingredients, Derek said, swirling his wine glass with an air of nonchalance. Regina's fork paused mid-air. Rare ingredients? She asked, feigning casual curiosity. Derek nodded. You know me, always looking for something unique to keep the menus fresh. Marcus seemed like he had good connections. He shrugged, shifting the conversation to another topic. The words lingered with Regina. Marcus's route had been unremarkable, his work was routine, focused on everyday deliveries. Nothing about him suggested he was sourcing anything rare. Still, Derek's charm and her own reluctance to entertain suspicions kept her quiet. But the seed of doubt was planted. As Regina worked on the case, she noticed subtle inconsistencies in Derek's behavior. His late nights in the basement seemed more frequent. The locked door, which she had once dismissed as a sign of his artistic secrecy, now felt like a barrier to the truth. The faint but unmistakable smell that occasionally wafted upstairs, the one she had chalked up to experimental recipes, nagged at her. Regina struggled to reconcile her professional instincts with her personal loyalty. Her love for Derek had always been unwavering. He was her partner, her confidant, the father figure Zariah never had. But now, every time she looked at him, she couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath the surface of his carefully constructed image. Despite the growing unease, Regina buried her doubts. She convinced herself she was being paranoid, that the stress of the case was clouding her judgment. After all, Derek was Derek, her brilliant, devoted husband. But as the case deepened, so did the cracks in her trust, and those cracks would soon lead to an unthinkable discovery. With Derek away at a high-profile culinary event, Regina Vaughn finally gave in to the gnawing suspicion that had plagued her for weeks. The basement door had been locked for as long as she could remember, an off-limits zone Derek had always explained as his creative haven. But tonight, curiosity outweighed hesitation. With trembling hands, she retrieved a lock-picking set from her precinct-issued kit and set to work. The lock gave way with a faint click, and Regina hesitated, her heart pounding as the door creaked open. A cold draft greeted her as she descended the narrow stairs into Derek's hidden workspace. The faint hum of industrial freezers filled the air, mingling with a metallic scent that made her stomach churn. Flipping on the overhead light, Regina was met with a sight that froze her in place. The basement resembled a macabre cross between a professional kitchen and a butcher's shop. Gleaming butcher knives were arranged with surgical precision on a magnetic strip, their edges reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. A large stainless steel table sat in the center of the room, its surface spotless but carrying an ominous weight. Her gaze was drawn to a row of industrial freezers lining one wall. Each freezer bore labels with cryptic markings, initials paired with dates. A sinking feeling settled in her gut as she opened the first freezer. Inside, vacuum-sealed packages were stacked neatly, their contents unmistakable, human flesh, meticulously portioned and preserved. Regina staggered back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her eyes darted to a nearby shelf cluttered with personal items, watches, wallets, a pair of glasses. Recognition struck her like a blow. These were the belongings of people whose faces she had seen plastered on missing persons reports over the years. Shaking, she turned to a desk cluttered with papers and an open journal. Derek's handwriting sprawled across the pages, the words sinking into her like daggers. The journal detailed his twisted ideology. A manifesto on what he called ethical predation. Derek had justified his actions as a form of culinary artistry, claiming that by elevating his victims through his craft, he was honoring them in death. The language was chillingly detached, yet disturbingly passionate. Regina's knees buckled as the full weight of her discovery crashed down on her. The man she had built her life with, the father of her child, was a predator, a monster hiding behind the veneer of genius and charm. Her mind raced through every moment they had shared, every meal he had prepared, every late-night secret he had kept. The betrayal was staggering. Gripping the edge of the desk for support, Regina's emotions spiraled from disbelief to rage. Her love for Derek had blinded her to the horrors lurking beneath his polished exterior. Now, standing in the cold, sterile horror of his basement, she knew there was no going back. Derek Vaughn wasn't just a chef, he was a killer. And her discovery would soon shatter their lives forever. Regina spent hours in silence, staring at the evidence she'd gathered from the basement. Her stomach churned with fear, anger, and disbelief. The journal, the belongings of the missing people, the meat packages, all of it painted a horrifying picture she couldn't ignore. She wanted to call the police immediately, but a small, terrified voice in her mind kept stopping her. What if Derek found out before they arrived? She had to confront him first, to hear him admit it. When Derek walked into the house late that night, his usual warm smile and charm made her stomach turn. He greeted her casually, but she didn't respond. Instead, she waited until he set down his things and made his way into the kitchen where she stood, visibly trembling. "We need to talk, Derek," she said, gripping the edge of the counter for support. Derek tilted his head, concerned. "What's wrong? You don't look well." Regina took a shaky breath and pulled the journal from behind her back, tossing it onto the kitchen island. "This is what's wrong. I went into your basement. I know what you've been doing." Derek's eyes flicked to the journal, and for a fleeting moment, his charming mask slipped. He quickly recovered, chuckling softly. "You went through my things? You know I hate that, Regina." "Don't try to deflect," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I found the tapes. The journal. The meat. You've been killing people. All those missing locals, they're in your freezers, Derek." Derek let out a slow exhale, his expression hardening. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said coldly. Regina's heart raced. "You're not even denying it? My God, Derek, how could you? How could you do this?" He stepped closer, his calm demeanor only making her panic grow. "You don't understand," he said, his voice eerily soft. "What I've done, it's bigger than you, bigger than me. It's art, Regina. These people. Don't you dare justify this." She screamed, stepping back. "They were people, Derek. Human beings. And you butchered them like animals." Derek's jaw clenched. "You're being dramatic. I made them part of something greater." "I'm calling it in," Regina said, her voice trembling. "You're done, Derek." At that, Derek's eyes turned cold, and he closed the distance between them. "You can't do that," he said, his tone low and threatening. "You won't ruin what I've built." "You're insane," Regina whispered, backing away toward the door. "Stay away from me." Before she could reach for her phone or escape, Derek lunged at her, grabbing her by the wrist and slamming her into the counter. Regina struggled, her screams echoing through the house as Derek overpowered her. He grabbed one of his prized chef's knives from the counter and, in a fit of rage, plunged it into her abdomen. Regina's eyes widened in shock and pain as she gasped for air. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Derek leaned close, his voice chillingly calm. "I told you. You weren't supposed to see." As she collapsed to the floor, Derek stood over her, watching as the life faded from her eyes. Blood pooled around her, staining the pristine kitchen tiles. He took a deep breath, running his hands through his hair as he processed what he had done. Derek's mind raced. He couldn't let this ruin him. He needed a plan, a way to make this disappear. With a cold detachment, he began cleaning the scene, already crafting a narrative that would preserve his empire and ensure no one ever knew the truth about Derek Vaughn. Derek stood over Regina's lifeless body, the blood-soaked knife still in his trembling hand. The horror of his actions briefly gripped him, but it wasn't long before his survival instincts took over. He knew he couldn't panic. Not yet. He had to stay calm and eliminate every trace of what had happened. He dragged Regina's body into the basement, the very place where her discovery had sealed her fate. Carefully, methodically, he cleaned the bloodstains from the kitchen tiles, scrubbing until the surface gleamed as though nothing had happened. He discarded the bloodied rags in a plastic bag, tying it tightly and setting it aside for disposal later. Once the kitchen was spotless, Derek turned his attention to crafting a narrative. He checked Regina's phone, scrolling through her messages and emails. Using her fingerprint to unlock it, he sent a series of carefully crafted texts to her colleagues and friends, hinting at a last-minute trip out of town for work. He even scheduled a call to voicemail to make it seem like she was busy. Derek knew he needed a way to dispose of her body. In the early hours of the morning, he loaded Regina's remains into a large industrial freezer he kept in the basement. The freezers had always been his morbid insurance policy, tools he had used before. Now, they would serve once more. To buy time, Derek orchestrated an elaborate cover story. Over the next few days, he posted on Regina's social media accounts, pretending to be her. Finally taking a little break from work, one post read, accompanied by a photo from their last vacation. The posts painted a picture of a woman taking some much-needed personal time, ensuring no one would question her absence immediately. As for the physical evidence, Derek meticulously disposed of Regina's personal belongings, scattering them across various locations. Her purse was dropped off in a bustling downtown alley, her phone smashed and tossed into a lake. Derek also altered the basement, removing and destroying anything that could link him to the missing locals or Regina's murder. When Regina's friends eventually grew concerned about her silence, Derek played the role of the distraught husband flawlessly. He reported her missing, claiming she had left for a work trip and hadn't returned. He even tearfully joined the search efforts, cooperating fully with authorities and deflecting suspicion with his charm. The police initially had little to go on. With Derek's calculated efforts to erase evidence and his ability to project innocence, the investigation into Regina's disappearance stalled. Derek leveraged his fame and public image to maintain the facade, ensuring that any whispers of doubt about him were dismissed as baseless. But beneath the surface, Derek's actions weighed on him. He became more reclusive, pulling away from public life and devoting himself entirely to his restaurants. He rationalized his crime, convincing himself it was necessary to protect his empire. Still, every so often, in the quiet of the night, he would hear her voice, accusing him, haunting him. For Derek Vaughn, the cost of his dark secrets was not only the life of his wife but the crumbling of his humanity, piece by calculated piece. His escape was masterful, but the shadows of what he had done followed him wherever he went, a ghost that no amount of cunning could ever truly silence. Regina Vaughn's unexplained disappearance set off immediate concern within her department. Known for her dedication and precision, it was unlike her to miss shifts or fail to communicate. Her husband Derek's explanation, claiming she had left for a short trip, raised eyebrows but lacked any immediate proof of wrongdoing. However, as days passed, the cracks in Derek's story began to show. Officer Denise Carter, a close colleague and friend of Regina's, spearheaded the investigation. She recalled Regina's unease about Derek's behavior in their last few conversations and noted the missing persons case Regina had recently been investigating, which seemed to weigh heavily on her. The turning point came when investigators reviewed Regina's last active days. Records showed she had logged into the department's missing persons database shortly before her disappearance. The case she had been working on, a delivery driver who vanished after a drop-off near Derek's restaurant. Tied directly to an area where similar disappearances had occurred over the last 3 years. With mounting suspicions, officers reviewed surveillance footage from the restaurant and surrounding areas. One clip revealed Regina entering Derek's home on the night she went missing but never leaving. This footage contradicted Derek's claim that she had left for a trip and strengthened investigators' resolve to dig deeper. A significant breakthrough came from the financial records. Investigators obtained subpoenas for Derek's accounts, revealing large purchases of cleaning supplies, industrial-grade freezers, and custom locks, all tied to his basement workspace. These purchases coincided with the disappearances Regina had been investigating. This alignment was critical in establishing probable cause. Armed with this evidence, officers approached a judge for a search warrant. The connection between Derek's financial activities, Regina's disappearance, and his proximity to multiple missing persons cases created a compelling argument. The warrant was granted. When officers arrived at Derek's home to execute the warrant, he initially appeared cooperative. He invited them in but grew visibly tense when asked about his basement workspace. Derek claimed it was off-limits due to sensitive projects. However, the warrant granted full access, and officers broke the lock when Derek refused to provide the key. The basement revealed Derek's horrifying secret. Rows of freezers filled with vacuum-sealed packages were labeled in a code investigators would later decode as names and dates corresponding to missing persons. Personal belongings, wallets, jewelry, and clothing, were neatly stored in bins. Regina's remains were found in one of the freezers, alongside evidence that tied Derek to other victims. A journal, uncovered during the search, detailed Derek's warped ideology. It outlined his ethical predation philosophy, his methods for luring victims, and his pride in integrating their remains into his culinary work. A chilling final entry referred to Regina, calling her a liability and confirming that she discovered his secret. The discovery left no room for doubt. Derek Vaughn was arrested on multiple charges, including murder, unlawful disposal of human remains, and obstruction of justice. His calm demeanor as officers escorted him from the home belied the horrors they had uncovered, but his carefully curated image as a celebrated chef was now irreparably shattered. The trial of Derek Vaughn became a national sensation, exposing the horrifying details of his crimes. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including the human remains found in his basement, forensic links to multiple missing persons, and Derek's chilling journal, which outlined his methods and twisted ideology. Witnesses testified about his controlling behavior, secrecy, and erratic actions, painting a picture of a man who used his charm and culinary empire to mask his atrocities. The defense argued Derek suffered from a dissociative mental disorder and claimed his actions stemmed from a psychological breakdown, but the jury was unmoved. After a brief deliberation, Derek was found guilty on all charges, including the first-degree murder of his wife, Regina Vaughn, multiple counts of murder related to the missing individuals, and abuse of a corpse. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, condemning his actions as a profound betrayal of trust. The case left the public horrified and questioning how Derek's crimes went undetected for so long. Advocacy groups called for improved systems to address missing persons cases and protect vulnerable individuals. Derek Vaughn's legacy, once tied to culinary brilliance, was forever overshadowed by the gruesome acts that shocked the nation. Derek Vaughn's story is a chilling reminder of how ambition and depravity can fester behind a mask of charm and success. His ability to hide his heinous crimes for years, even from those closest to him, exposed the fragility of trust and the dark depths of human behavior. Regina Vaughn's tragic death and the horrifying revelations that followed left an indelible mark on the community, sparking debates about accountability, justice, and the dangers of unchecked ego. As Derek serves his life sentence, the families of his victims continue to grapple with their loss, seeking solace in the justice that was finally served. The case remains a haunting testament to the duality of human nature and the lengths some will go to achieve their distorted vision of greatness. What do you think drove Derek Vaughan to commit such atrocities? Can justice truly heal the wounds left behind by his actions? Let us know your thoughts. For more stories that uncover the darkest corners of human behavior, subscribe to Crime Chronicles and join us as we explore the complexities of the human psyche.